from our police and fire department. So this morning I was in Boston to see my own son's sporting event, and now I am overwhelmed at the thought of the loss of these families, of the future lost by these children and their families. And the leading cause of kids get death now is guns and gunfire, and that is unacceptable. But I want to thank the fast response of our officers. Guns are quick. They don't give you much time. So even in a remarkably fast response, there was not enough time. And those guns stole precious lives from us today in Nashville. And in this dark hour, let us support each other. Let us go and hug our children a little bit closer tonight. And thank you all for being here, and I want to ask Chief Drake to come and give us an update.
Thank you, Mayor Cooper. Again, thank you all for being here. Just an update from today's press conference. We've identified the shooter as Audrey Hale, a 28-year-old female that lived in the Nashville area. We have investigations ongoing now at the residence on Brightwood Avenue, and we have made contact with the father that lived at that residence and are putting together more information. We've also determined there were maps drawn of the school in detail of surveillance, entry points, etc. We know and believe that entry was gained through shooting through one of the doors is how they actually got into the school. I want to take the time to at least say, and I won't say the victims' names, I'll let Don say that, but out of the 6 victims, 3 adults, 3 of those were children. 2 of them were age 9. 1 was 8, about to be 9. All the families have been contacted. The victims' families have been contacted as well. My thoughts and prayers go out to the family. When we send our kids to school or to any place of safety, we expect them to live, learn, have fun, and come back from that day's experience. We don't anticipate things like this. And I want to say thank you to our partners, to Chief Swan, to Glenn Funk, to our mayor for his support, to our federal partners. But also I want to say thank you to our first responders who got there and immediately went in and addressed the threat of someone that had multiple rounds of ammunition, prepared for a confrontation with law enforcement, prepared to do more harm than was actually done, and we were able to stop the threat, and unfortunately, 6 victims. So my thoughts and prayers again, but the praise go to the men and women. As I've said before, we will not wait. I was hoping this day would never ever come here in this city, but we would never wait to make entry and to go in and to stop a threat, especially when it deals with our children. So thank you. They're not. Just me. They're not saying anything.
I'm going to go over the victims' names with you now. The 3 9-year-olds who were killed: Evelyn Dickhouse, William Kinney, Hallie Scruggs. 3 adults: Mike Hill, a custodian, age 61, Cynthia Peak, to my understanding, a substitute teacher, age 61, and Catherine Kuntz, age 60. As Chief Drake said, we have identified the active shooter as Audrey Elizabeth Hale, age 28. We'll take just a few questions if you have any.
Don, do we believe that she was a former student at the school?
Yes, we do. Chief, you want to address that?
Yes, from our investigations tell us that she was a former student at the school. I don't know what grade she's attended or grades, but we do firmly believe she was a student there.
Did she identify as transgender?
She does identify as transgender, yes.
Is there any reason to believe the shooter first went to the church before going to the school?
I can't give you that information. I wasn't sure. We know that the minute the calls came in, we responded to the church, so to the school.
To the school.
Yeah.
Did you have was there like 2 officers that went in when they first got there? Do you know how many there was at the first interview?
So it was 5 officers that immediately went in and addressed. We have video that we're going to release, but you can see in the video, you can hear gunfire going on as they're in the school. They address the threat and take that threat down.
Chief, what do we know about her weapon?
So we know there were 2 AR-style weapons, one a rifle, another was an AR-style pistol, and the other was a handgun. We believe 2 of those may have been obtained legally, locally here.
Can you confirm that one of the adult victims, Catherine, is head of the school?
Was what?
Is head of the school?
There was some, I don't know her exact capacity within the school, but it was higher up in the echelon.
And were any of the children victims related to any of the school staff?
Unsure. I believe one may have been, but I can't confirm that.
Did the shooter have any criminal history?
No history at all.
And no motive at this point? Anything discovered in the apartment or house?
No, we have a manifesto. We have some writings that we're going over that pertain to this day, the actual incident. We have a map drawn out of how this was all going to take place. There's right now a theory of that we may be able to talk about later, but it's not confirmed, and so we'll put that out as soon as we can.
Is there any reason to believe that how she identifies as white?
I'm sorry, I knocked someone's mic over. I didn't hear you say that again, sir.
Is there any reason to believe that how she identifies has any motive for targeting the school?
We can give you that at a later time. There is some theory to that. We're investigating all the leads, and once we know exactly, we'll let you know.
So was this a targeted attack?
It was.
Do we know about a history of mental man or woman?
Don't know any history of mental illness at this time, but we are looking at that as the investigation is ongoing. And I'm sorry.
She identified as a transgender man or woman?
It's a woman.
Was it the only school that was targeted?
All right, that is Police Chief John Drake of Nashville, who is briefing reporters on the deadly grade school shooting in Nashville at the Covenant School there this morning. The police confirming 6 dead, 3 children, 1 8 years old, 2 9 years old, and 3 adults, including Catherine Kuntz, who is the head of the Covenant School. The police chief also said that the shooter has been identified as 28-year-old female Audrey Hale. He said she's a former student of the school and confirmed that Audrey Hale was identified herself as a transgender person. State of Tennessee earlier this month passed and the governor signed a bill that banned transgender medical care for minors, as well as a law that prohibited adult entertainment, including male and female impersonators, after a series of drag show controversies in that state. Once again, the shooter, Audrey Hale, 28 years old, identified as transgender female. Mayor John Cooper of Nashville spoke for many when he said he's overwhelmed by the loss at the Covenant School this morning. I want to bring in our Justice Department correspondent, Pierre Thomas, who has covered so many of these shootings. And this now, while the police chief specifically said they're investigating motive, this is a highly unusual crime in so many ways, a tragedy that now involves what may be this boiling controversy across the country around transgender health care.
Terry, devastating situation. I think one of the things that struck me about his press briefing is that he made it very clear that this was a premeditated mass shooting, that the shooter had maps of the school, that the shooter had done surveillance of the school, shot through the door to get into the school. So this was a person who clearly had been planning this, intended to kill those people, and he, in emphasizing how quickly the officers acted, laid out that this could have been so much worse, and it's clearly a horrible situation that we saw unfold. The information, they have a lot of information. The fact that they found a manifesto, writings of this person, as we predicted, there would likely be something that would point to the why in this case. Also, that they are doing a search, looking at the social media footprint of this person. A lot more to unfold, but clearly the fact that the person has been identified. We don't know yet the exact role that transgender played in it. Clearly, it's unusual to have a case like this. Also, he pointed out the firepower, assault-style rifle, assault-style pistol, handgun, lots of ammunition. Devastating day that could have been much worse.
All right, let's go to Brad Garrett, a former FBI agent who is frequently with us on these shootings. Unfortunately, Brad, a very rapid response clearly by law enforcement probably saved lives.
Oh, there is no doubt about that. Since we've moved in the last 30 years from waiting outside schools to literally going in seconds after we hear it, once we get to the school. 3 could have been a lot larger number today. 3 is obviously too many children dying. But because they went in and they followed the shots to the second floor, it saved, who knows, countless lives.
All right. Brad Garrett, Pierre Thomas, thank you very much. Once again, 6 killed there at the Covenant School in Nashville. As Mayor Cooper said, this is an overwhelming loss. He also noted that guns are the leading cause of death among America's children. There will be much more on this story. David Muir on World News Tonight is reporting from the tornado zone in Mississippi, the deadly tornadoes there. He'll have much more on that story as well. And this, I'm Terry Moran. We return you now to our regular programming.
This has been a special report from ABC News.
With so much at stake, so much on the line, more Americans turn here than any other newscast. ABC News World News Tonight with David Muir, America's #1 most watched newscast across all of television.
What's good to watch, read? Where can I get a great deal on what I'm just dying to buy? Oh, it's all right here. GMA Life. Get the latest celebrity buzz, deals and steals, and the coolest lifestyle tips from GMA.
I love that so much.
Streaming weekends on ABC News Live.
You never know what you're going to get on this show. That's all I'm going to tell you.
Yes, Whoopi! Is this mic on? Can you hear me out there?
Behind the scenes is always a better show.
Absolutely, absolutely.
That's what people don't see during the commercial break.
Right, they don't.
What happened?
I had no idea really what I was getting myself into.
That day that we walked out, I treasure that day.
I couldn't sit there.
You're doing good, Joy. You're doing good.
Oh, yeah, baby.
It was crazy.
Behind the Table. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
All right, here we go. You ready? Let's do it.
Yes, it's the show America wants and America needs right now.
This is What Would You Do? Let's go. How are you?
How cute.
Yes.
So what will you be watching Saturdays on ABC News Live?
What would you do?
Hey, I guess I just found out.
The What Would You Do Marathon, 2 to 6 Eastern, every Saturday on ABC News Live.
My favorite show.
What does it take to be America's #1 news? It takes asking the straightforward, tough questions.
Do you believe that Donald Trump should ever be president again?
How would your mom feel about your relationship with your brother now?
I can't imagine what it feels like to go from $20 billion to $100,000. Yeah. Are you worried about going to jail?
You write that you had low-grade depression. How'd you get out of that?
The news-making interviews.
You said that there were 6 friends. One of them was sick.
Yeah.
Do you have future political aspirations?
going to the front line.
The search for survivors. How does this war end?
And getting to the heart of the story.
Thank you for being here. We'll be here for the long run.
ABC News, #1 in the morning, the #1 newscast, #1 in daytime talk, Friday nights, Sunday mornings versus the competition, and the #1 streaming news. Thank you for making ABC News America's trusted, straightforward first choice. America's #1 news, ABC News. Most watched, most trusted, and streaming live to you anytime, anywhere, and free. This is ABC News Live, America's #1 streaming news, free to you 24/7. Watch America's #1 news whenever you want it, wherever you are, anytime. ABC News Live, streaming live and free on all platforms.
With so much happening these days, it's hard to keep up.
Things change hour by hour, minute by minute.
The historic weather that's now unfolding.
The worries on Wall Street.
We're bringing you the Right Now. But a nationwide teacher shortage.
The Right Now look at the day ahead. An alert this morning for dog owners and the key takeaways from the biggest stories.
World News Now and America This Morning, America's #1 early morning news.
Today does feel a little different. Early mornings on ABC News Live.
Good afternoon. Our breaking news coverage continues now on ABC News Live after officials in Nashville, Tennessee, just briefed the press on that deadly school shooting that police say left 3 students and 3 staffers dead, along with the 28-year-old shooter. The students who were killed, 8-year-old William Kinney, 9-year-old Evelyn Dickhouse, and 9-year-old Hallie Scruggs. The adults killed 61-year-old Mike Hill. He was a custodian at the school. 61-year-old Cynthia Peak, she was apparently a substitute teacher, and 60-year-old Catherine Kuntz, she was the head of the Covenant School. Police in Nashville there saying that the shooter, Audrey Hale, had identified as transgender and was a former student at that school. And it may also be worth noting that the state of Tennessee, at the beginning of this month, passed, the governor signed a bill that banned transgender medical care for minors, as well as put limits on drag shows in that state for minors. And we want to bring in now on this fast-moving story ABC News Chief Justice Correspondent Pierre Thomas. So, Pierre, I wonder if I can just ask you once again, you know, as you look at the pieces of the picture coming together, what do you see?
Well, the thing that stuck out at the press conference, Terry, is the notion that police know so much more, that this was premeditated, that there's a manifesto, some writings that they're focusing on now, that they found maps of the school, that there's evidence that there had been surveillance of the school. So the fact that this was premeditated, not some spontaneous thing that happened at that school is devastating news to hear, chilling news to hear, quite frankly. The fact that they are identifying the shooter, they have a name, they're doing a deep dive on her background. The chief noted, as you said, that she identifies as transgender. They're not quite ready to talk about what, if any, role that played in the shooting, but obviously the law that you just mentioned is on everyone's mind as a potential reason for what happened here. But clearly, this happening in the way that it unfolded with those children. The chief said 2 9-year-olds and an 8-year-old who was about to turn 9 dead. 3 members of the staff killed. Just those images of those children being let out of the school. Unfortunately, this is something that is now happening across the board, with mass shootings being of the level and the nature that we're seeing, 128 so far this year. Sadly, death came to that small town church and a school that only had 200 and some odd students.
As Police Chief John Drake said, they said, when we send our kids to school, we expect them to go there and learn and come back safe. And more, as you know so well, Pierre, that doesn't happen. You know, schools, they lock down, they do drills. Our children are aware that they essentially live in a combat zone when they're in American schools, or any school could become one, let's put it that way. And I do want to get to the police response here in Nashville. It seems to me that the officials there are pointedly noting the rapidity of the response, the way they engaged. They didn't pause. They went to engage the shooter when they heard the gunfire on the second floor. I think they're drawing a sharp contrast with the response in Uvalde, Texas. And it probably did save lives.
Terry, there's no doubt about it. And you have to look at what happened in Uvalde as perhaps an aberration. Since about 20 years ago, and I think Brad Garrett will confirm this, law enforcement has had the attitude and been training that patrolmen, whoever gets to the scene who has a gun, must go in and confront the shooter, period, full stop. And many people say that what happened in Uvalde was not only tragic, but just beyond irresponsible. Some have used the word cowardly as well, that you cannot leave babies, children, at the mercy of a shooter for any period of time, that you must engage and you must continue to engage to save lives. The chief pointedly said that the person was armed with 2 assault-style weapons, a rifle and an assault-style pistol and a handgun, had significant amounts of ammunition. And again, the fact that this person came hell-bent on killing people meant that if they did not stop the shooter, that person would have probably continued to shoot. So that response, the fact that the chief has pointedly been signaling that this was the intent, that he hoped that this would never ever happen in his city, but that if it did, this was his expectation, that the officers must go and respond, and clearly that message had gotten through.
Let's bring in Elizabeth Newman, former official at the Department of Homeland Security and ABC News consultant on these stories and others. And Elizabeth, I want to note that Police Chief John Drake was asked after he had identified the shooter, Aubrey Hale, 28 years old, a former student at the Covenant School. He says that she identified as transgender. He was asked if that had anything to do with the motive in this case. And he says, we're working on that. We don't have anything on that. And yet this is a very intense political discussion right now. Tennessee having passed this law that bans transgender medical care for minors. And aside from the politics of it, it seems like there are so many possible motives for this to occur in our country. Mental illness, now perhaps political violence. We've seen just rank hatred in the shootings of synagogues and racist shootings. It seems like everyone with a grievance heads to school to kill children.
We know about most mass attackers is there's usually multiple threads of grievance. It's not just one thing. Usually there might have been something in the background that makes you cognitively open to ideologies that suggest that violence is the solution to your problems. Clearly there's an aspect of personal connection here. The individual went to that school at some point. We don't know if there was a motivation against one specific individual, if it was just the beliefs that school holds. That school is a PCA school. It is a conservative, Orthodox, Christian approach to gender and to marriage. So we don't know if that is a part of the challenge here. We don't know if perhaps the real focus was, as you suggested, what has been going on in the state of Tennessee, and this was just an easy target of opportunity because she was familiar with it. That's what the investigators are digging into, and sadly, sometimes we get so fixated on the motive because we really want to know why. It's so hard for us to understand how somebody could be just so lost that they think they should take the lives of third graders. So we're like desperate to know why, and I understand that human instinct. The need though is for us to be recognizing that this individual had a series of things that were signs and indicators that they were not well. I mean, if you have detailed maps, if you have a manifesto, somebody in their life probably knew something was off. And we don't know yet if anybody made a phone call or tried to get them help. Like, we still need to see what else may have happened in the lead up to this event. But the answer is not in trying to pinpoint the ideology or the motive. The answer really is about figuring out how to identify people before they're about to act violently and get them help. Intervene. Let's manage their threat level. Let's manage them and get them help well before we start losing kids. And we just, this happens too much. We've got to find a better way forward.
And the mayor of Nashville, thank you, Elizabeth, John Cooper, spoke briefly at the top of the briefing that Nashville officials held, and he voiced just that sense of, as he put it, overwhelming loss. Here's a little bit of what he had to say.
But let us love each other and support each other and hug each other and pray. But let us love each other and support each other and hug each other and pray for each other and pray for our families. But also let us praise our first responders. 14 minutes. 14 minutes. I believe under fire, running to gunfire. And then I want to thank the seamless response for federal and state authorities from our police and fire department.
Overwhelmed by loss is what the mayor said he is today, as is any decent person, given the slaughter of innocents here, the killing of these 3 children in Nashville. And let me go back to Elizabeth on that. The motive, as you say, maybe secondary to the things that we can practically do, because people are going to have all kinds of motives. But it's the appalling, the horror of killing children that they want to inflict on not just the children and their families, but on the society, because we cherish children. And yet we continue to harden schools. Our children continue to do these drills. They live under the shadow of a potential attack in every American school. There's no place that's immune from this. Is there more that we can do to protect children, no matter what the motive of a monstrous killer heading for their school door might be?
I do think that there's more we can do. I said earlier today that I really don't think, I would love for Washington, D.C. to become responsible and for Congress to actually pass laws that start to address some of the underlying vulnerabilities in our society, including gun control and more resources for prevention. I don't have much hope that Congress is going to act. And kudos to those who try to keep making them act. I mean, that's a very difficult task. I do think, though, that at a state level, I think governors, I think state legislatures can do more. I think they can pass with less challenge common sense gun reform. I think that we can be investing in a prevention apparatus. Every state needs a prevention strategy, and there are a number of states that are working on this. And once they have those strategies, they need to fund it, they need to invest in it, and they need to be in it for the long haul. Like, this is a decade at least of building out the infrastructure necessary to identify individuals that are having difficulty, getting them help through mental health and behavioral health professionals, and making sure that we have referral systems and threat management capability in every community. We need to be doing it in the online space too. In my day job, I work for a tech company that works to intervene online. Most people are finding those radicalizing ideologies in the online space. We need to intervene before they even see those ideologies, or if they are seeing those ideologies, offer alternative solutions. There are things that are working, we're just not scaling it. So we need to scale it up, and we need to make this a priority in our country. And we haven't even talked about gun control. There's any number of things that could be done at a state level that would make it more difficult to obtain weapons particularly for those who are showing indications that they're not well, that they're ideating violence. And red flag laws are a key piece of that. But we also need to make sure we're implementing red flag laws. We've had a number of incidents recently where a state actually has a red flag law, but law enforcement, the courts, and various people in society aren't either aware of those resources or don't know how to use those resources. So we need to not just pass laws, we need to implement and we need to scale. This is a societal problem, and we the people need to hold our state officials accountable for addressing it.
And Elizabeth, thank you. Those are practical, pragmatic things that can be done to protect our children, protect ourselves. As the police said, that this was a targeted attack. Police have described it as a targeted attack at a Christian school. Synagogues have been attacked before by mass shooters. Churches have as well. And the police are describing this as a targeted attack. Let's go to Police Chief John Drake for just a brief summary of what the police know about the preparation that Audrey Hale, the 28-year-old shooter in this case, apparently engaged in before committing these atrocities.
We've also determined there were maps drawn of the school in detail of surveillance, entry points, etc. We know and believe that entry was gained through shooting through one of the doors is how they actually got into the school.
All right, let's go to Brad Garrett now, who was with the FBI for many years, an ABC News consultant, and I understand Brad with the FBI, at least for a time, at the Nashville field office. And I just want you to kind of react to what Police Chief John Drake has told us about what they know this shooter was doing in preparation for this attack.
So, Terry, you have to sort of start with that mass shooters, when they are building up to commit this mass shooting, is the high point of their life. And they have built up enough anger, revenge, resentment, and they start to then externalize all that anger and rage. It's everyone else's fault that I'm in the state that I'm in, of why I feel powerless and why I've been kept from getting a job or whatever it might be. That school represented something to this shooter. Did she get bullied there? Did she have issues there with staff? We'll know that in fairly short order. But that school represented something to her, just like in the Sandy Hook shooting, that school, Adam Lanza looked at it the same way. He was older and went back to an elementary school. So you have to sort of start there. And so when they finally decide they're going to do this, there can be a lot of planning. The chief mentioned it. There's a manifesto. There are maps of the school. If she was a student there, she knows where the exits and entrances are and maybe the best door to go through to get in. So as she then puts this together and goes apparently to a side door, shoots the locks, goes inside, her goal is to probably kill as many people as she can, including children. And they're not human to her. They represent something bad that's happened to her. Totally illogical, makes no sense, of course, to the rest of us, but I'm just putting you through the eyes of a shooter. And if the police had not gotten there when they did, we sadly would be talking about a lot bigger numbers today.
The police really did respond, but it is chilling, Brad, to hear you step us through the preparation, the mindset of somebody who does this, this unimaginable evil that this person wanted to perpetrate on children, on innocent children. We do have a picture of one of the victims, 60-year-old Catherine Kuntz. Dr. Catherine Kuntz was the head of the Covenant School. She laid down her life for it sounds like. She was 60 years old, and that is, as I say, a Christian school there, and is among the 3 adults, including a custodian and apparently a substitute teacher who happened to be there that day, who died in this attack. And I want to go to Elizabeth Newman, on that. We see teachers now called upon or stepping forward in these situations and taking fire. You know, there's a teacher shortage in this country, and maybe that's one of the reasons. It's now teaching children can be a high-risk occupation.
It's kind of gut-wrenching, isn't it? I mean, I went into the Homeland Security field after 9/11, and I never actually went into the law enforcement or intelligence services where you're really putting your life on the line, but I knew a lot of the people that did, and they took that oath knowing that they were putting their life on the line, and that comes with it a certain amount of challenge and especially in the home front, pressure, but there are usually resources made available to help those that put their lives on the line manage the stress and the threat that you're dealing with. I don't know that we're doing that for teachers, and yet for 20 plus years they have also been on the front lines protecting our most precious resources. And what you have to deal with in order to walk into the school every day, not only are you walking into the school knowing I might have to lay my life down for these kids, you also have to put on a brave face and do it in such a way that it doesn't scare the children. It is a remarkable thing that our teachers do in this country, and I feel like we could do better by them. Like they are putting their lives on the line for my children, for your children. Don't we owe them more than what we have been doing the last 20 years? And all we do is have the same cycle of fighting over, you're trying to take my guns away, or you're trying to, kill my kids. I think we need to set aside the standard talking points and the standard scripts and recognize that everybody, except unless you're a maniac, everybody wants our kids to be safe. We just disagree on the how. If we could have rational conversations on the how, we might make some progress. But calling each other names and questioning each other's motives, that doesn't help. And we just end up in this spiral and never get any progress or solutions, and our teachers deserve better.
That's for sure. And Brad, I want to go to you now. An investigation like this going forward, the crime is concluded, the horror lingers in our hearts. What's the job? What are the next steps, and what's the purpose?
So the next steps are exactly what you would do if the shooter was still alive. You're going to do a thorough processing of the school. And maybe they'll get the FBI evidence response team to help them. That's up to Nashville. You'll do a thorough search of the residence of where she lived. Conduct a lot of interviews, family, friends, associates, schoolmates, folks she attended social events with, people in her life. And then that same thing applies to obviously her social media profile, assuming she has one. Apparently there's a manifesto. It may give you additional leads, so that when you get done, you really have a detailed profile of her and what probably led her up to commit the act she committed today. Terry, your question is why? Is one primary reason is that, and this goes to a number of things Elizabeth has said, is that we still don't do a good job in stopping shooters. We do a lot of preliminary stuff. We target hardened schools. But the key is we don't do a good enough job protecting people, and that's what has to change.
Absolutely, Brad. Thanks very much for that. We now have from police in Nashville a picture of the shooter, Audrey Hale, 28 years old. She was a former student at the Covenant School. Police Chief John Drake saying that Audrey Hale identified as a transgender person. She is the person who planned, mapped out, bought weapons for, or obtained weapons, I should say, and executed this school shooting at the school she once attended, the Christian school, the Covenant School in Nashville, Tennessee. I want to thank Brad Garrett and Elizabeth Newman for being with me. We'll be right back after this.
With so much at stake in our world right now, we wanted to thank you for your trust and for making ABC News America's #1 news.
And thank you for making ABC News Live America's #1 streaming news.
Right now in America, with so much at stake, thank you for making ABC's This Week America's #1 news and